So we're obviously spoiled a little bit at Cloud Gateway with the breadth and depth of our networking and network security experience and expertise, but obviously we know out in the market that's not the norm. One of the biggest challenges we see and hear from our customers and prospective customers in the market in general is the idea of a networking skills gap. Now, you've obviously been working in networking nearly all of your professional life. You've sort of seen the origins of that and perhaps how that challenge and problem has evolved and potentially got worse. Share with us a little bit of your experiences with that, the challenges it causes, and then potentially we'll come on to some of the solutions that you see.
Yeah, well, there's a very different world in 2024 to the one that I professionally entered in 2000, which feels as long a time ago as it actually is. There are vastly less network people. When I entered the working world in sort of technology, there were kind of two main, I'm going to call them like factions. There were two ways that you kind of progressed, and I think progression is an important part of this. I started on IT help desk. I was, for all intents and purposes, the T-boy. I was 17 years old. I came up through help desk and desktop support, and then the two factions I'm talking about. There was kind of network, what we called networking, and what we called servers. And that was kind of it. I'm well aware that there are other areas of IT, your coders and your programmers, and this, that, and the other. But actually, they still seemed to sort of fit loosely in these two factions. And say one way was networking, which is networks and routers and security and all the switches and all of that good stuff in the world that I know and love. And the other was servers, infrastructure, applications, databases, storage to a bit. Your kind of programmers probably sat in there. And it's safe to say that the more popular route was definitely not networking. I think that was largely because people liked the aesthetic of the server side. So you had something visual that you could work with, which was in a world that was coming off of the back of Windows 95 and Windows 98 and into 2000 and XP was quite enamoring. But also at the time, Microsoft had started its certification track, what was the MCSE back in the day, and that was kind of seen as the big one to get. This is like the big vocational certification to get. If you went down the networking route, there was a similar thing was growing, which was the Cisco professional track, and they very much were two sort of paths that people took. But they were network people. It was an avenue to take, and there was enough people to do these things. I think there's a couple of reasons why, over the course of the last 20 years, this has changed. One, as a potentially sensitive subject, but I think it's true and worth knowing, is offshoring and the rise of offshoring in the mid-noughties. And two is the rise of the public internet and the expectation of the public internet. So we'll deal with them differently because the offshoring came first. So by the time that I had got to sort of what we'd call tier 3, so you're sort of an advanced technician in support, your path beyond that would be design and architecture. What had started to happen with the bigger companies, the telcos, as well as smaller companies as well, is that offshoring had become an option. And at the time, it was almost exclusively India. And so what was happening was the easier jobs, the tier 1, the tier 2, the help desky type jobs were all put out to India. Tier 3 was being kept inside of the UK. Absolutely fine, worked really well. I understand it from an economics perspective. We worked with the guys in India, absolutely fantastic team, great people, super talented, no problems. But one major problem is that there was no path to then get to being a tier 3. You had less and less opportunity, unless there were companies that actually weren't offshoring. You couldn't move from being on a help desk up through, and you just couldn't learn that. So not being given the opportunity to come through the trenches and do those things meant that path was cut off. And offshoring's obviously evolved humongously over the last 15, 20 years. A lot of stuff is actually now back onshore or you have hybrid teams. Offshoring isn't exclusively India. There's lots and lots of teams, lots of Eastern Europe is used for different reasons. But there is an opportunity to learn with it, particularly because we're in a more global world, the way we work and the technologies that allow us to do that. But what it means is there's been this kind of lag, which means you've had kind of 15 plus years of no one coming through. It's very rare to find people that work in networking, or frankly at all. But to find them under the age now of about 40 years old is very, very tough. There are a few, but it's very unique because of that. The other, say, is the rise of the public internet. So the advent of cloud and the rise of the public internet, there was this kind of belief that networks, private networks, WAN technologies, all these things that came with it could be simplified by using the internet as an underlay. So everything could be put on the internet, and simplifying the programming, if you like, by making it, some radio buttons, some sliders, and hey, if it works, it works. Cloud, particularly Microsoft and Amazon, were huge exponents of this. In fact, their original kind of builds of cloud didn't have things like Express Route and Direct Connect. It was meant to be internet and public facing. But the internet has its challenges. It's not owned by one party that we can kind of look to make sure it's up to scratch. We don't have full control of it. No one has full control of it. It has no SLAs. It has security concerns if you're going to go and put things out there. It hasn't been the kind of the panacea that I think everyone has hoped. And so now there is a turn back to a kind of hybrid approach, but the people aren't there. The people have to be nurtured. That's the reality. We can't magic these people into existence. And that nurturing has to come from education. And education is in two major phases. You've got degree education, you've got university education, you've got college type education, and you've got apprenticeships. I think one of the other fundamental shifts over the last 20 years is the way that, particularly in the United Kingdom, education has been viewed and how it's been accepted. When I was a child, the adults around me had access to apprenticeships. Apprenticeships were a huge thing. Education then became, as I went through school, was very much you have to go to university. And I think what's happened is it's balanced now. There's a lot of talk about apprenticeships. I'm, of course, a huge advocate of apprenticeships. Whilst I didn't have an official apprenticeship, I started at 17. I was given what was essentially an apprenticeship approach. But what you didn't have back then that you have now is far better, more mature courses in colleges and universities that are relevant rather than bracketed as what was computer science in the early 2000s, which was not really very specific. Now there's the fundamentals of networking and programming and infrastructure and the internet, and there's almost a business wrap around these things as well. So there are two different paths in getting the right people, and we need to make sure that we're, as an industry, not just us as a company individually, as an industry, ensuring that those courses are up to scratch, that they're future-proofed. AI we've talked about a lot. There needs to be lots of thought about AI. It needs to be talked about now. It's no good, that almost needs to be seeded into courses earlier, but we need to give access to those apprenticeships as well. We need to be taking people on, helping give them a pathway and bringing them through. But education, as you know, does not start at 18 years old. Education starts a long way earlier than that. And, I've got two children, both teenagers now. I've had an opportunity to see what education looks like from an IT perspective at high school level. It's much better than I thought, but I think it could get a lot better. Now, I think one of the things that it would be kind of obviously ridiculous not to touch on as well is that this industry is entirely male dominated. It's always been male dominated. And it's not, again, similarly, in the way I can't magic engineers up who haven't been taught for the last 20 years, I can't magic women into a space when they haven't had the opportunity to come through, as much as I would love that. So it is incumbent on us to ensure that STEM subjects, engineering, mathematics, the sciences, the things that maybe historically weren't seen as the sort of thing that girls would go into, are open to everyone. And I have a daughter. I feel extremely encouraged that sort of language is being used. I think that the sciences are being supported more. I'm seeing far more women in those subjects. And I think it's starting to show through. I'm seeing a lot more women in their 20s now. And you've got to think, this is a conveyor belt. This is going to take 20 years to bridge a gap. This isn't going to magic away. A lot more women in the workplace from an IT perspective that is not the world that I grew up in. And that gives me confidence that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing there is that we need to be doing things to accelerate that process, that conveyor belt, but there's only an extent to which we can do that in a sustainable way, basically. So what can companies like Cloud Gateway, what can companies much bigger than us, but who operate in the same space, what can we do to sort of help accelerate that, move the needle in our own little way?
Yeah, I think there's got to be an air of reality here. I think, if we look at this concept of a conveyor belt, if there is a gap in what is on the conveyor belt, until such time as the conveyor wraps around at one end and everything moves to the end, the gap will be there. And I think that reality is really important, is if we try and falsify filling the gap, what we're going to do is cause more problems. And I think I've seen that. I think what people have done is try to move inexperienced people into roles that they can't do. They've tried to move experienced people kind of almost backwards into roles that they shouldn't be doing. We have to accept that there is a gap. So whilst there is a gap, until such time as we've got that working, that beautiful conveyor belt working perfectly, we are going to have to look to who we've got and what we've got until such time as they tip off the belt. We have to look to those people that we've got, that with skills that we've got, and really exploit them. We have to look at companies, both small and large, who have got those skills to be able to go and fill that gap. Companies like ours, for example, we have the luxury of being able to go and find those people, kind of almost cherry pick those people into a very kind of unique setup that we've got that allows us to be able to do these things, that allows us to be able to maneuver more fast, more quickly, more efficiently, but be able to give confidence to companies who need these skills and need these expertise in a world that is, becoming even more kind of exponentially in need of technology. We are going to have to be lent on even more.
So one thing that we're doing at Cloud Gateway, and this is in response to feedback we've had from existing customers, prospective customers, is offering what we're calling a network architecture review. So a fairly meaty piece of work where we'll work with an organization over a number of days to understand, plot out their network, understand where they are now, where they want to be in a fixed period of time, and then I guess at a high level, a little bit of gap analysis as to how they get there with some recommendations. For the time being, we're offering that as a complimentary service. I think you've been a big part of that initiative. For us, it gives us a chance to learn more about the companies we're working with or potentially working with, understand some of the challenges that they're facing, and in turn for us to provide a better service all round. Tell us a little bit more about that, how you think it can add value, and what we're looking to achieve working with these organizations where perhaps the skills they need urgently right now aren't available to them.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've seen a lot in my working life is that a lot of companies, a lot of people, and myself included, sometimes on a daily basis, don't know what they don't know. And that is arguably the biggest problem. The complexities of running a business, particularly if they're larger, on a grander scale, it's very difficult to keep up with what's happened, where are things. Over time, a lot of businesses change, they acquire, they merge. We see that a lot in the public sector. It's a huge change. Private sector companies, they're doing it as well. So it's, I think that the difficulty sometimes, the challenge is more for a company to recognise that, look, I need to know what this is. And sometimes having an internal team with a capability isn't the problem. They're fine, but you can't see what you see every day. I could bring in someone to Cloud Gateway and say, can you just have a look at this? And they would tell us things that we can't see that are happening on a daily basis. So bringing someone in to be able to conduct that kind of independent review, to go, right, this is where we are, this is what we can see, this is what it is, this is how you could achieve, we're aware of where you would like to go, this is what it would look like, this is what the path would be. It allows us to come in and help with that, be those expert advisors, to be able to give that information, and then possibly assist with this journey as well. It's something that we're very well versed in, but I think it's that first thing that's the most important thing. It is independent and it's a fresh set of eyes from the right experts, and that is where I have often seen projects and programs fail when there's sort of that post-mortem, is we didn't really know where we started. We thought we knew, and then things come awry. So I think that's what I would say is probably the greatest value of having sort of independent experts coming in and doing this kind of thing. And I'm hoping we get the opportunity to do this with a number of prospective customers.